what's the worst that could happen? Everyone was saying to me, you're absolutely mad to leave a secure corporate job.
Accountants that I deal with are scared to put themselves out there.
Far easier to find 50 businesses that are using Shopify than it is to go, I want 50 clients. You go to a networking event and you expect to get business, so nothing kind of comes. Shift it slightly of almost going, oh, I'm thinking about doing this. How would that resonate with you?
Hi, welcome to this week's episode. I'm with Jonathan. Jonathan, do you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction and kind of who you are, what you've done?
Okay, so my name's Jonathan Gaunt. I guess I started life in the kind of zero world as a partner, accountant and bookkeeper. I started FD Works in 2012, and the whole kind of idea there was, how do we support small businesses and effectively kind of provide them with a finance function? And for me, at the time, I felt as though there was a huge gap between having worked in a large business, how they were getting supported versus how a small business was supported. And at the time, there's so much more focus on compliance. So it's almost like that bit of how do we kind of close the gap between the two? I guess on that journey, I've been really lucky to initially with a client kind of build an app. So we started kind of that dangerous few words of I wish I could code turned into us building something called Magic Brian, which didn't work. From that, we saw an opportunity in around data quality, and that was Xavier Analytics, which was sold to Dext or Receipt Bank at the time after 18 months. And then I spent 2.5 years in a lucky position of working in FD Works, but also working in Dext. And for me, it's that bit of seeing real problems in the accounting practice and then going to Dext to kind of solve those problems. Beginning of 2023, myself and Rich and James, who are co-founders of Xavier, decided that we wanted to give it another shot. And then we kind of left to set up Socket, and we spent 6 months kind of looking at what the problems were out there. We started to build something around scheduling and resource management within an accounting and bookkeeping practice. But what we realized is that actually in order to be able to do that, you needed the proposal. We couldn't get the data we wanted from proposals systems that were out there. So effectively, we kind of decided that there was an opportunity to build something which solved the problem for accountants and bookkeepers, and that's Socket.
Okay, that's really cool. I mean, there's very few accountants that I know that have run a firm, set up an app, sold it to one of the big players, and then gone, let's go again and do that again. Let's get the band back together. And I think that probably comes to maybe one of the things that makes you stand out to other people is that boldness to like try and go and find out. Where do you think you get that from?
I think part of it is there's something really interesting about understanding what you've kind of currently got. So I think that there's an element here of almost like, what's the worst that could happen? And I think for a lot of us, it's almost like when I left Lloyd's Banking Group, everyone was saying to me, you're absolutely mad to leave a secure corporate job and go and start up. But actually, what's the worst that could happen? Well, the worst that could happen is I could go back and work there, and I could probably go back there as a contractor and earn more money. Or if I couldn't, I could go back and get a similar job. So I think sometimes it's that bit of the reflection of going, well, what's the worst that could happen? And I think there's also something that I try to move sectors as an accountant. So I try to move from financial services into other sectors, but I was kind of pigeonholed of almost like, yeah. But the recruiters would always turn around and go, but we can get a lot of money by placing you over here. So what about this job? So for me, some of it is I'm a little bit stoic, and it's like control the controllable. So if I try things myself, or if I take ownership and accountability of it, then I can kind of move forward. So for me, that's a big thing there of control the controllable, and don't waste much energy on anything else. There's a small space where you can try and influence people, but in that bit of, you've got to kind of draw the line. And again, another phrase I use quite a bit is 1, 2, fuck you. And it's almost that bit of, there's only so many times you can try and influence someone. At some point, you've got to kind of stop and move on.
Yeah. Okay, and I think that's quite an important message. Obviously, my audience are looking to, how do they get more leads? How do they get more attention towards their business? That piece there you said there is like, what's the worst that could happen? And I don't know whether you find this. A lot of people, a lot of accountants that I deal with, are scared to put themselves out there in case of ridicule.
Yeah, I think like feedback is so important, and feedback is so important in so many different kind of levels. And the only way you'll get feedback is going out there and kind of socializing something, or kind of, what do you think about this? And I think, again, there's something quite important there in, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
Because you've started something, and it's always easier if you write something down and then go to someone and say, what do you think about this? They will pick holes in it. Whereas if you go with a blank sheet of paper, you'll spend 20 minutes just kind of like looking at the sheet of paper. So I think there's something here about starting the journey and taking action and then getting feedback, because then you can start to make corrections. So some of it might be like, who are your customers? You've got to be able to kind of describe what your customers look like, because otherwise you'll sit there and go, I'm not sure about them. It's almost like, as soon as you put something in your mind, it then becomes far easier. So I want to work with e-commerce stores. Okay, what platform? Shopify. So again, it's almost like that bit of, it's far easier to find 50 businesses that are using Shopify than it is to go, I want 50 clients. I think some of it is almost like, what is it that you want to be famous for? Or what is it you're very, very good at the moment, starts to kind of then give you some focus to where'd you go. But you have to get out there. And it's almost like you have to have those conversations, because that helps you to kind of refine what you're good at. And I think that focus makes everything else so much easier. When you win the work, it's easier to deliver it. In terms of where you're going to find them, it's easier. So I think some of it is almost like starting to document something, and things then appear. Like counting red cars you're going to see in the next 2 hours. You'll see red cars coming from every single direction. And I think you're just opening your mind up a little bit to start absorbing information.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's one of the things I always say is, the people that are good, they consistently show up. The people that are great are the ones that are making changes based off the information that they get. And that's the key, right? Isn't it? It's, if I put a message out and maybe it hasn't quite hit the person that I want, if I come back and I go, okay, so who is my target audience? What did they think of this? What do I need to change to get in front of them?
Yeah.
Then that's where you kind of go from like good to great almost.
Yeah, I think there's this whole bit of expecting something too soon. So when I started back in 2012, it was almost that kind of whole bit of, this is new to me. So I'd worked in industry, and in industry, the work turns up at your desk. You've not got to go and look for it. And then I started going like networking, and it's almost like that whole kind of bit of, you go to a networking event and you expect to get business, but nothing kind of comes. And I think then it's part of it is for your own sanity. It's then starting to shift it slightly, of almost going, oh, I'm thinking about doing this. How would that resonate with you? So you're not going there expecting to get business, but you're going there hopefully to help you try and kind of validate something, or you're finding something and it's almost like that bit of, can I just buy you a coffee to understand you in a bit more detail? So for me, it's not about always getting the close. It's about helping you to refine the words you use, or how do you make people feel more relaxed? So again, very, very quickly, and maybe it's about being yourself. So very, very quickly, I kind of got to the point whereby it was okay to kind of turn up in jeans and t-shirt, because actually
Yeah.
the type of people that I was working with were more relaxed with me in jeans and t-shirt, and actually I was more relaxed. And it's all of those kind of bits, and it's like, what are their real problems and what are they words they're using, because they weren't the words that I was naturally thinking of. So
Mhm.
again, it's all of these conversations help you to refine, and then you get to this point of almost like it resonates with people.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's one of the biggest things I always tell my clients to do is either, if you have the people that you want to work with as clients already, go and speak to them, and if you don't, go and find the people and just ask them questions, because most people are willing to help. But I find it with with the wording. I was helping an accountant with their landing page, and they were like, "We'll do your compliance, your regulatory audits, all this kind of like jazz words that people in the industry know.
Yeah.
But when you actually speak to their clients, they go, "Oh, you're going to do my accounts for me." And that one subtle change is, "We'll do your accounts stress free." That went from like getting a couple of signups every month to getting 10, 20 signups every week. And it's
Yeah.
just those tiny little changes. But you have to understand your audience,
Yeah.
connect.
And for me, you should enjoy it. Like, if you
Mm,
don't want to interact with people, this is probably the wrong like industry for you, because actually you're going to have to speak to lots of people, and the more successful you are, the more people you've got to speak to. So I think some of this is about building your own confidence as well,
mm,
and again, changing those word patterns. But I think at the core of it, you have to be yourself. So it's almost like that bit of every conversation you have, how you present things in document and an email, be yourself, because otherwise you might chase someone down with a different, using your alter ego, that when they meet you, it's kind of like disappointed. So I think some of this is almost like, get rid of all of the crap, just be authentic.
yeah, and I think people can tell when you're not being authentic
Yeah, totally,
easily.
totally. And I think this for me is the whole bit of, you should feel more relaxed yourself as well. Like, genuinely
Mhm.
be more relaxed, because um, it's kind of an interesting one when your name's above the door, and for a lot of business owners, our name is above the door. We can't go and get another job. So if it all goes horribly wrong, we're the last people that are sat here. Therefore, we have to build the business for us, because we
Mm.
could be here for another 20, 30 years. So for me, it's like authenticity is kind of key.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaway points from that. What I really want to understand now is, you set up FD Works,
Yeah.
you grew it quite well. What were the first sort of things that you did to get in front of clients and so forth?
Yeah, I think for me it's that bit of, I use a phrase of kind of like kissing a lot of kind of frogs, and it's that bit of, back in 2012, there wasn't, like, zero was very kind of new to the market. People didn't kind of quite get the opportunity.
Mm,
So it was about going out there and understanding some of the communities which kind of existed. So I'm from Bristol. Bristol's a pretty kind of vibrant city, lots of creatives, lots of kind of tech. And so there was that whole kind of bit of, where do these people hang out? And it's almost like, how can I go there? So I think looking at things like Eventbrite, where are these people going to kind of
mm,
hang out? And then going there, and it's almost like starting to build some friendships. And I'll go back to that point of, don't expect anything. Go there just to have a bit of fun, learn something possibly more about their world, and then kind of come back and then start to think about, well, okay, how can I help them? Yes, you do the obvious things of building out a website, etc. But I think for me, it's that bit of even your website, you need to understand what the problems you're kind of trying to solve. And I think then that just comes back to more and more and more kind of conversations. Bizarrely, we did quite a bit of cold calling.
Okay.
And everyone said that it wasn't going to kind of work, but actually we had quite a bit of success from that. So again, it's almost like going through, you know, who you're targeting, and then it was just literally just kind of pulling together lists and almost kind of going through that bit of how can I get in front of someone to have a conversation. But it was never about selling. It was almost about, I'm really keen to understand about your business,
Yeah.
and kind of like what I could do to help. And so it was more from a learning kind of perspective that you'd go, it costs you a coffee, you'd learn quite a bit, and then you might plant the seed. And then in 6 months' time, someone would kind of come back and go, you know, that conversation we've had, something you said has been kind of resonating for a while. Or it's then that bit of when you understand their problems, you can perhaps kind of go back, saw this, thought of you. So again, it's about just getting out there without getting disappointed that you haven't got a piece of business.
Yeah. And the biggest bit there, and this is something that I put out in an email like a good couple of weeks ago, was being outcome dependent versus being process dependent. If you're outcome dependent, and like say for example, you want to get 10 clients by the end of the month, and you get 4, you're going to kind of be a little bit depressed, a little bit annoyed at that, but like, oh god, like this isn't working. Is where if you're process focused, you're like, okay, cool, I got 4. Where did those come from? Where do I need to double down and up? Okay, I'm doing 100 cold calls and I got 3 from there. Great, I'm going to do 500 cold calls or 200, whatever that looks like. And it's that obsessiveness around process rather than outcome. The outcome will come. Process is right.
I think you're absolutely right there, and I think some of it is also understanding that and building the process, because then you can scale. So yes, you might not be able to go from 100 calls a week to 500, but actually could you then employ people, and can you measure? Like the measuring bit is then so important, because it's kind of like, well, actually, if I got 500 to get 15, can I then cope with it? So again, it's almost like that bit of, do you have all of the parts in play? But I find it really kind of beneficial of, how do we, what's the right process? Do I kind of understand it to a certain extent that I can then hand it across to someone else to do? So I've been quite all the way along, I like getting my hands dirty, because I think that's the bit where you can kind of understand it, and then you can almost be a sounding board with other people along the lines, but you know, the cool way of doing some things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such obviously what we covered there is such a really important thing, because if you aren't getting your hands dirty, then you're not getting those learnings, and that's like you said, right, one of the cornerstones for your growth, both maybe professionally and personally.
Yeah, and I think it's that bit of, you should still bring in the experts, but I think this is the bit where it's almost like the Venn diagram. You've got, I'm an expert in terms of, I know what I do and how I can kind of help it, and then I bring in an expert who is kind of, their expertise might be that sales and marketing bit, and it's that bit of, how do you join in the middle to kind of like work out of, you'll be saying things around, yeah, but it's not like that, is it? Or like, we need to clear message. What's the clear message? But then that helps me to kind of think about things to get to that kind of point. So I think some of it is about almost like bringing different people together with different skills and bouncing off, but then kind of getting to that commonality of, right, okay, we're going to do this, and then that's the action bit where it comes back to the process. Right, we've got to do 100 calls. Where are we?
Yeah, and that's you kind of you've coupled that accountability there, and I think the best leaders employ or bring in smarter people, but they make the decisions. That's really like a great leader. It gives them the freedom of there's no point bringing somebody in that's got all these expertise for you to ring fence them and go, that's your box, stay in there. It's like, okay, this is what I want. How are you going to get to it? Great, go for it. What do you need from me?
Yeah. No, it's and I think so, it's hard. Like it's hard trying to find out what the right thing is. But you're right, when you kind of focus on the process, when something works, it's almost that bit of right, okay, we found something, can we double down on it?
Yeah, and whenever I look at the things that I've done, and probably the same for you, there's things that I know work so well. Like when I was at iWalker and we were pushing iWalker Pay, there were a couple of things that I used to love doing. One of those was we do a webinar, and I know that people, when they saw the product, they'd buy it. It was that simple. So it's like, how do I get people in front of this product? And I know that everyone loves either a free lunch, a free coffee. So it's like, come to this, I'll pay for your lunch, or I'll give you a Just Eat or delivery voucher. And I know as soon as I got those elements right, you see the product. It was great. It was kind of we did an Amazon voucher, which is basically if you booked a demo, we'd give you a 50 quid Amazon voucher.
Yeah.
Which obviously, I mean, it's a 50 quid CAC, right? Minus the other costs. It was absurd. We did 26 new clients in like the first 2 weeks of running the campaign. But it was that doubling down on I know that when people see the product, they buy it. So it's like, how do I get them there? And I know if I incentivize people, I'll get them there.
I think there's so much as well of looking at other industries. So like whatever we do is never going to be unique. Someone else has already done it, and possibly in a slightly different industry. And that's where I think there's so much that you can learn. We're really fortunate that we can learn from what our clients do, because we interact as accountants and bookkeepers. We interact with lots of businesses, and so you will know some of those that are smashing it, and it's almost like, well, what are they doing? We've got an example of like early on, one of our clients were a PR agency, and they were sending out kind of biscuits of almost like here's some biscuits, and might even have tea bag with it, but it's almost like the whole kind of bit of take five and read this. And it's kind of like, they got some stuff from that, why don't we do exactly the same? So it's almost like, and it's almost like, why don't we do exactly the same? So it's almost like, well, we could see their messaging, how do we tweak it to be our messaging? They were getting biscuits made, well, I knew where they were getting biscuits made. It was kind of like easy, and it was almost just nothing more than rip off and repeat, rip off and repeat. And it's kind of like, well, what should we do? Let's try 50. We tried 50, and it's almost like, stop, measure the results. Is that good enough? Yeah, it is. Let's do another 50. So I think sometimes it's that bit of, just rip off those people around you, because we're in a fortunate position. We get to see some great stuff.
And I think the thing as well there is, if you went to that person and went, what are you doing? They'd probably tell you and give you that information anyway. So if you're seeing people have success, go and like do that first important step that you said, which is make it your own, tweak it, and then do it. And I'm a big fan of A/B testing. So whenever I send out email marketing, whenever I send out letters, I will send out, like, say for example, I've got a list of 100. I'll send 50 with one subject line and 50 to another, and whichever subject line gets the most opened, I'll then send that email to everyone else, or vice versa with a letter.
But it's kind of interesting, because I think there are so many businesses that need supporting, that actually you can go to other accountants, bookkeepers, and go, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And it might be they're in a different town, or it might be they're down the street, but actually they've got slightly different customers. So I think that you can ask the question of so many people. And I think actually we think that Fred down the street is a competitor, but the reality is he's probably quite open to having a conversation with you. So again, this comes back to the worst. What's the worst that can happen? Someone could say no, and it's like, well, that doesn't really hurt, does it? And early doors, there's someone that I worked with, and he blew my mind about the cheek of what he would ask for. So he'd ask for random things, and it's like, there's no way that first of all someone's had the cheek to ask that question, and there's no way they're going to say yes to it, and they'd say yes, and I'm kind of like, but shit, he's not got an awful lot of substance to what he does. So why aren't I more confident and just ask the question? Because actually, if they say no, I'm in no worse position anyway. So just ask the question.
You're absolutely right. And I can't remember I read this, or it was someone's post, and it was basically, when you next go to a cafe, ask for a discount. And I remember reading it trivially and going, "Oh, fuck it, let's go for it." And I went, it was like Starbucks, and I was like, "Oh, can I get a discount?" And it was no, but that kind of stayed with me. And literally on the Sunday just gone, we went to it. My partner, it was her sister's birthday. We went for the birthday like carvery. And when we were paying for the carvery, the lady service was like, "Oh, we've got no gammon." I was like, "Oh, okay, can I swap it for a pint of Guinness?" And she was like, "Yeah." And then she named my partner. She goes, "And maybe just like a small wine." And the woman was like, "Yeah, sure, no worries." So just from asking that question, I know obviously it's a bit of a detour, but we got a Guinness and a wine for absolutely free. And it's like, you could, whether you're you want to speak to what you maybe deem as a competitor, or maybe there's a business that you really want to deal with, just go to them and go, "Hey, can we have a chat?" Because the worst they can say is no.
Yeah, and I think it's that bit of it's about building confidence. It's about building your confidence, and I think very, very quickly you realise that you're getting out of your comfort zone, and you're not going in there for a sale. Like for me, it's almost like that bit of, if all I'm going to get out of this is I'm going to meet someone new and I'm going to have an interesting conversation, that for me is kind of great. If I can help them, brilliant. But it's not the sole intention. For me, it's more that bit of, sometimes, like, will a prospect make a decision there on then, meeting someone new, where actually high value ticket purchases? So there's almost this bit of, it's going to take a bit of time. There are going to be a number of touch points here. So why don't you make one of those touch points a coffee? And why don't you start to then kind of build that trust of almost like, that's great, me and Tom, you asked some great questions. And then it's that bit of, how do you then follow it up?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if if you've learned what's worked in the past, you can then build those steps into that journey. Because I'm sure you're probably aware, and people that aren't, you've got the funnel where someone has their awareness, they then have kind of that general curiosity or interest, then they're like,
Yeah.
okay, like, how do I go about buying that? But you have a great conversation with someone and they go, "Oh, Jonathan's is a good lad," and then 2 days down the line they're speaking to someone, they go, "I need the new finance director because I've got all these problems." You're probably going to be the first person that they think of.
Yeah. And for me, it's just that, it's that having a bit of fun along the way, because because it's hard. Like it's that bit of, how do you genuinely enjoy what you do? And I think so much of this is, we're just scared. Like, you're in that kind of the sales and marketing kind of space, which isn't the comfort zone for an accountant or bookkeeper. So it's almost like that kind of bit of, how do they just kind of shift their mindset slightly to make it work for them?
Yeah, exactly right. And I think one of the biggest things that you kind of prove to is that actually if you just take that first little step, you'll get so much further, that now you'll be doing like countdown conundrums and getting but I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 5-6 years ago you might have not put yourself in that position, as where now that you've worked up to it.
So it's kind of interesting. Like, I would say that, so me being a bit more visible on social media is a decision that I made over Christmas, like Christmas 2023. And it's that whole kind of bit of I try to conquer LinkedIn. I try to kind of make it work, but it's almost that bit of I was looking at it going, it's a corporate platform, therefore I need to write it in a kind of a corporate way, which just isn't me. And you write something, you get no engagement, and then it's kind of lost. And then you kind of stand back and it's like, actually, there's things that you need to do slightly different. So if you want content to live longer, LinkedIn's not the place for it. The place for it is probably your website, because that's kind of evergreen. Whereas LinkedIn is more that bit of starting to kind of raise your awareness. And that's where I was kind of like looking at other people. Where it comes down to is just being yourself, not overthinking it. And so beginning of this year, literally, it's almost like what I think, I just do very, very quickly. And then I come back and look at it and it's like, that was brave. Like, that's me kind of like being braver to take action, but it's also to be myself. And I've struggled to talk to, I don't get social media because it's about talking to yourself. So therefore, I'm doing it for my own enjoyment. And so a lot of the posts that I do, I will sit here chuckling to myself as I do it. And so again, it's that whole bit of I get some satisfaction by posting something on LinkedIn. And if I can make someone smile, because that's who I am, I want someone to, the way I'm speaking on LinkedIn is exactly the same way I would speak to my friends. A little bit cheeky, a little bit kind of fun to it. And it's kind of working. We're getting so much more engagement. Yes, we're getting customers. We're getting kind of people that are reaching out. Yeah, and I'm just being cheeky.
And I think what you've established there, that you're gonna post on LinkedIn, but you found your medium of who you are as a person, how you're gonna go, and you've probably, people are reaching out because they relate to what you're saying, and they relate to the way, probably more importantly, the way you're saying it. They might see something over here and go, "Oh, that's amazing, awesome," but it's a little bit not them. Same message, but maybe in their context, they're like, "Oh wow."
I also think there's something here around, like, people talk about quality and quantity, and I think there's an element of kind of like you need both. So for me, it's almost like that bit of, I joke about I want to grow my number of followers, like, but part of me, there's a serious element to that, because actually, if it's about 1%, so if 1% of people are interested, well, if I've got 100 people that I'm kind of connected with, that's one. If I've got 100,000, that's 1,000. So for me, there is this kind of whole bit of like, you do need some scale, because actually then you can start to play with smaller percentages.
Yeah, exactly right. And you also get to kind of test a lot more. As if you're testing in the same small pool, you're going to get similar results. It's where you have a big, massive audience. You can kind of test new things and new ideas.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to, who do you want to work with? Who are you trying to kind of interact with? And then I think that's the kind of the key bit. As soon as you know what you're looking for, it's a lot easier to find. And so that whole kind of customer persona is really, really kind of a vital piece of work. And that comes back to, who are you working with at the moment that you enjoy working with? And I think, yeah, a lot of the answers are there in front of you. You just need to stop and reflect.
That I always say that to people when they're like, "Oh, we want to work with more of this, we want to work more with that." I always go, "You've probably got a base of clients that are maybe making 80 to 70% of your revenue.
Yeah.
In that 20%, there's probably 1 to 3 clients that pay you the most amount of money and you love as people. Go and speak to those people because they're the people you want to deal with."
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting, because we've talked about the whole kind of bit of, if we go back to Lloyd's, we used to do a thing called a well diagram, which is almost like you take your highest value client and then number one, you take the next highest. And so what you'll see is you'll see a high kind of like it rises very rapidly and then it starts to kind of flatten off. And if you add costs in there, then it will start to kind of decline. So there's this point where actually, if you go to the top, you could be more profitable with less clients. And I think all too often we think it's about more clients, we think it's about new clients, whereas the reality is actually you've got some existing clients who aren't your right clients, but they're perfect for someone else. So let them go. And then there's also an awful lot more that you can do for your existing clients. Therefore, you don't need to focus all the time on getting new. It's about how can I do more for my existing clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you know, say you speak to you let go one client that's paying you 500 quid a month, and you speak to another client and they start paying you another 550 a month that you actually like, you're probably also going to feel maybe a little bit more fulfilled.
Yeah. And I think some of this is coming back to like, what are your rules? Like, how do you want to engage? Like, we've messed up time and time again where we perhaps haven't set the rules as to how we want to kind of interact up front, and then actually it kind of deteriorates. Whereas actually, if we were a little bit more kind of like those clients where we thought it might be a problem initially, and we've set the rules out, actually they've been brilliant and they toe the line. So yeah, I think there's an awful lot of clarity around what you plan to deliver and making sure you kind of capture that in the sales process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's powerful stuff. It really is. And I think it can often seem so simple, yet so it gets overlooked maybe, as opposed to like your brand new flashy website with all the bells and whistles. Actually, it's like you've missed the first tiny little step that you've overlooked because it was just too simple almost.
Yeah, but no. I think it's like a big experiment, and I love kind of like playing and trying to kind of work it out. And I think, yeah, it's that bit of there's got to be a code, and I've got to be able to kind of crack it. But in the meantime, I'll have fun trying these little experiments, and if they work, we'll just keep doubling down on those until they dry up, and then we'll find something different. But yeah, I'm still looking for that kind of silver bullet in terms of endless customers. So if you've got that, Tom, that would be that'd be much appreciated.
I mean, you've kind of got it there, right? Like, it's why the reason why I call the business Lead Flow Lab is exactly that point there. It's you have to continually experiment, and when new variants, it sounds awful. Like when new things come, like TikTok, for example, there's so many business owners on TikTok that actually that's like obviously a newish piece of social media, but it's completely different to LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So it's like you then have to experiment with what works there, and that continual experiment will continue to get you more clients because you're continually trying to find out what gets people over the line. So I guess the last question I have from me, say someone is maybe they're starting their firm and they want to start getting new clients in, or maybe they've hit that point where the referrals are drying up and they know they need to start winning new business. What's probably the best thing that they could do right now?
I think the first thing is like if you've got an existing business, I think it's almost like, who are your favorite clients? Like, spend a bit of time just kind of like reflecting on them. Who are your favorite clients? Why are they your favorite clients? Because I think then that gives you that focus of who you're looking for. If you've got someone in your mind, you can then start to think straight away, where do people like enter the name, hang out? And that's then the bit where I think it's starting to give you some idea of what you need to do and where you need to do it. And again, it might even be that bit of having a coffee with that one client, and it's almost like, what is the process that you went through in order to decide to work with me? What was the bit where it's kind of like, yes, I'm going to sign? It's all of those types of things of don't don't think you can't go back and ask the questions. So for me, it's like that. What's your target persona? And again, if you're starting out in life as an accountant or bookkeeper, what do you want your perfect client to be? Because I think then you can build your app stack around it. You can really solve their problems, and then you can kind of go deeper from day one. And actually, I think there's something could be quite attractive about starting a firm from scratch, because actually you can build those processes around that 1 or 2 persona and go incredibly deep. And then I think you will just be so efficient that you'll be able to service clients you win. They will then be going out there and kind of shouting and raving about you.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Like if you're starting from scratch, build it around the person you want to look after and the business that would best support them.
Yeah,
that's cool. So obviously, under here in the comments, we'll put your LinkedIn profile. But if somebody wants to connect with you, or they want to speak to you, or maybe about Socket, what's the best thing for them to do?
So literally, LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. Kind of send me a message and we can connect there. If you're interested in finding more about Socket, then head to the website usesocket.com. And yeah, from beginning of August, you'll be able to kind of sign up, take out a free trial. But yeah, reach out, let's have a conversation, and I'm kind of here to help. Yeah, I think we've got an amazing industry, and the more we stick together, the better we'll be.